Hey folks, Erick Stacklebeck here. Welcome to a Watchman Newscast live stream. Always great to have you with us. Usually on Wednesdays, we go for one full hour here on the newscast, including Q&A, questions and answers at the end of this 1 hour live stream. Great to have you with us. A lot going on, man. I feel like we have a lot to catch up on, at least here in the U.S. where I live. We had a long weekend, a long holiday weekend. We were all off on Monday, Memorial Day, as we commemorated and remembered the brave men and women who laid their lives down for this country, for the freedoms we enjoy, that we still enjoy here in the United States. So off Memorial Day, we did still have a video over the weekend that we posted. But in the meantime, I'll tell you, I've always found, and I've said this on previous newscasts, that Mondays are always busy. Coming out of the weekend, there is never a shortage of material to talk about every Monday here on the newscast. But this Monday, we did not have a new video. So we've got a lot to catch up on in the world's or on the world's most strategic and volatile region, the Middle East. So let's get right into it. Before we do, real quick, just want to give everyone a shout out who's watching around the world. We have the UK, we have Germany, we have Qatar. Wow. Hello from the Gulf. I was just in the UAE in Bahrain, a stone's throw from Qatar. New York, New Orleans, Dover. I imagine Dover, the UK, not Dover, Delaware. India, Shalom from India. We have people. Hey, folks, no matter where you are in the world, you should be excited right now because you are literally engaging with watchmen and women around the world. We have Israel here as well. For such a time as this, it's such a joy to have this capability to communicate with people around the world right now. Thousands of us will be watching very, very shortly. I'm just giving everyone a minute to catch up and join us live here on the live stream. Again, we're going for one straight hour. We have Nigeria with us. We're going until 5 p.m. Eastern time, Lancaster, PA, or as we say here in the Philadelphia area, Lancaster. Good to have you with us as well. Canada, awesome. Okay, again, hey, folks, be encouraged and be excited. That isn't it refreshing to know that you're not alone? Sometimes I feel this way sometimes, and you probably do too if you watch this channel. It feels like the world is losing its collective mind because it pretty much is. And sometimes you can feel, we have Denmark with us. Hello, Denmark. Sometimes it can be a kind of isolated feeling, right? You say, wow, am I the only one who has the Holy Spirit, who sees clearly, who is not going insane? You're not. I can assure you. We will have thousands of people here today from literally all corners of the world joining us here on the newscast. It reminds me of Elijah, right? After he faces off with the prophets of Baal, he really, through God, wins a great victory against the prophets of Baal. Jezebel threatens him and he retreats. He goes off into hiding, basically, and he basically says, I'm paraphrasing, I don't have my Bible in front of me, but he says, basically, God, take me now. I don't want to live anymore. This whole country has gone mad. It's a world gone mad. It's a world that has turned towards evil. Get me out of here. And of course, eventually God did, in a pretty dramatic way, on a chariot of fire. Speaking of which, we'll talk more about a modern day chariot of fire in a minute. But what did Elijah say? I want out. And what did God say? How did God respond? He said, I still have 7,000 men who have not bent their knee to Baal. Wow. So I would say that today we still have thousands right here on the Watchman Newscast and many more around the world, I can assure you, who have not gone mad, who still put the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob first and foremost, who have wisdom, discernment, clarity, who understand the signs and the times that we are living in right now, Bible times. And I believe we have many with us today. I refer to our live stream viewers every week as the modern day sons and daughters of Issachar. So be encouraged, take heart. Again, God told Elijah, I have 7,000. I believe there are many more than that around the world right now. Elijah at the time didn't have the capability to see all around the world, but today we can through YouTube and through the web and everything else. As bad as some of this modern technology can be sometimes used for evil purposes, man, we can also use it for a whole lot of good. And that's what we're doing right now connecting with people all around the world. Okay, that's my opening preamble. I just wanted to encourage you. We have a whole hour, so we can riff a little bit. We don't have to be hard news for all 60 minutes, but let's get into that hard news right now. Big news. I mentioned chariots of fire, or a chariot of fire, Elijah ascending to heaven in that chariot, as the Bible lays out for us. Well, we had a modern day chariot of fire, not a literal chariot of fire like Elijah went to heaven in, but Israel is about to wrap, actually. It ends, I believe, on Friday, this Friday, June 3rd. Its largest military drill in decades, perhaps ever since the modern day rebirth of the nation of Israel back in 1948. And it is called, three guesses, drum roll please, the Chariots of Fire drill. Pretty cool name and pretty telling name for this massive military exercise that Israel is undertaking right now. Now, I know we have talked about this on previous newscasts and previous live streams. We've been kind of teasing the Chariots of Fire drill. And you might be saying, hey, we talked about this already. Why are you mining this ground again, Stacklebeck? Well, it's kind of reached a crescendo. Remember, this was a month-long drill in Israel. And now we're kind of hitting the latter stage and the most important stage of this massive military exercise, which again includes every branch of the Israeli military, including even the cyber branch. Well, the big one is the simulation of an airstrike, or strikes, I should say, against Iran's nuclear facilities. That went down yesterday, Tuesday, May 31st. I told you this thing was reaching a crescendo after weeks. A massive military exercise by the IAF, the Israeli Air Force, over the Mediterranean Sea, working on long-range flights, working on bombing, working on basically every facet of a massive multi-dimensional airstrike against Iran's nuclear facilities. Wow, this went down yesterday. And again, folks, this was the big one, the largest in decades. This is nothing to take lightly. I would say, number one, Israel is doing this now in June 2022, not by coincidence, but because time is short and getting shorter in regards to countering Iran's nuclear weapons program. It's not just me saying it, by the way, and it's not just Israel saying it. It's not just the Gulf states like the UAE and Bahrain saying it. It's actually the UN's atomic watchdog. That's right. More on that in a minute. Hard to believe, but you know it's bad when even the UN is saying, uh-oh, we may have a problem here with Iran's drive for the bomb. But more on that in a minute to give you an idea of the urgency of this drill. But one other aspect that Israel worked on, okay, mid-air refueling, by the way, is another important one. I'm not sure the exact distance between Israel and, say, the Bushehr nuclear reactor. It's over 1,000 miles. I don't have the approximate number in front of me right now, but it is a long flight. It's not, hey, it's even longer than when Israel or Israeli fighter jets bombed Iraq's nuclear reactor, the Osiris reactor, back in 1981. Iran is an extra distance across the Persian Gulf. Not only that, these are fortified, hardened underground facilities. This is not, this is not above ground like we saw, again, in Iraq in 1981, or even in 2007, where, remember, Israel took out the Syrian nuclear reactor of Bashar al-Assad. Hey, folks, you think things are hell on earth in Syria right now since 2011 and the outbreak of the civil war there? Over 500,000 people killed, including tens of thousands of women and children. Well, imagine if Assad had the bomb, how precarious the situation in Syria would be right now. And by the way, the Iranian regime, with its hooks in Syria and in proximity to a nuclear arsenal, nightmare scenario, Israel, what I'm saying to you is that Israel has done the world a favor twice. In 1981, could you imagine Saddam Hussein with the bomb? So Israel took that reactor out in 81, and then in 2007, Assad's reactor. Israel twice has done the world a great favor, and the world, of course, showered Israel with gratitude in return. Or not. Even the U.S. was not happy. Two Republican administrations, including the great Ronald Reagan, they were not happy about those strikes. In 81, and then in 2007 under the George W. Bush administration. So Israel has gone it alone before. Here's a litmus test for you, folks. Israel, when it comes to a nuclear threat gathering in its immediate vicinity, Israel has gone it alone before. Regardless of the world thinks, Israel has defended itself by itself twice in fairly recent history, 81 and 2007, when a nuclear threat was gathering. Both times, not so much the second time with Syria, because that was very much under wraps. That emerged. It wasn't like a deal like in 81 where everyone knew it was breaking news. Israel just struck a nuclear reactor in Iraq. Syria was kind of a slow burn. It wasn't that night, massive breaking news all over every cable news outlet, all over the web. No, it wasn't like that. Those details kind of dripped out gradually as the weeks and months went on about the strike on Syria. But we do know that behind the scenes, the West, Israel's ostensible allies, including in the U.S., were not happy about it. I wonder what they're saying about it now, 15 years on, as Iran and Russia are, again, with their hooks in Syria, and there's madness there. But Israel will defend itself by itself. History shows, recent history, when it comes to a nuclear threat gathering. Simple as that. Folks, this is not brain surgery. Read between the lines of what I am telling you right now. Israel will not allow Iran to acquire nuclear weapons under any circumstance. It's not happening, no matter which Israeli political party or which Israeli political faction or which coalition is governing the state of Israel. Hey, there are far-flung ideologies. They don't agree on much across the political divide in Israel, but one thing that they can agree on, and I've seen this up close time and time again in interviewing Israelis of various political stripes, Israeli top officials, former and current, they can all agree, and their whole tenor, their whole countenance changes when they talk about this. They all agree that Iran can never be allowed to acquire the bomb. I mean, there is agreement. Again, these are folks who could be at each other's throats 1 minute on another issue, a domestic issue, say, in Israel, but the next minute, they sound like they're reading from the exact same script. And they're not reading from a script, literally. I don't mean that, but they're the same songbook, I guess you would say, when it is talking about Iran's nuclear program. It's really stunning. And there's a resolve. When I say their whole countenance changes, there's a resolve among Israeli officials. Never again means never again. So back to the drill, Chariots of Fire. Obviously, refueling will be big because of the distance between Israel and Iran. It's a tough slog there, number one. And secondly, again, those underground facilities have been hardened. This will not be easy, but something tells me that Israel, based on what it can only be deemed, in my view, past miraculous military operations. I do not say that word lightly. I don't use that word lightly. Something tells me Israel will find a way. Israel always seems to find a way to carry off these daring military operations. Not always a 100% accuracy rate, but many times Israel, in the very least, has been able to severely at least weaken its enemies and push back the timetable significantly on the various nefarious activities of its enemies. So call me crazy, but I have to think that with the genius, the ingenuity of the Jewish people in the state of Israel, that they've got something up their sleeves. And I do not think that it will just be traditional airstrikes. I think this will be a multifaceted type strike. Perhaps sea, perhaps in addition to air, perhaps some cyber sabotage. Perhaps there's some teams on the ground who will engage. You would think it will be, because of the hardened nature of Iran's and the far-flung nature. Look, it's various sites, ladies and gentlemen, spread out across Iran, and hardened sites. It's a tough target, multiple targets. So with that in mind, you have to think that Israel will not just go at it through the air, especially because Iran's air defenses have improved in recent years. You would have to think that Israel would go at it in a few different ways. Now, obviously, 1 second. a hot day here on the East Coast, and I snuck in a workout real quick to clear my head and think about what I was going to say to you before I came on with you. But you have to think that Israel is saying, okay, we can't just do the old traditional airstrikes, and airstrikes may take, more than a day. It may be multiple runs, you would think. That's why, again, the refueling, mid-air refueling is so important. So obviously Israel wasn't going to play its hand in Chariots of Fire, but it was definitely message sent, I would say. And one important aspect of it is that the IDF, or Israeli forces, also carried out exercises on the island of Cyprus in the Mediterranean, a few hundred miles off the coast of Israel. And the exercises in Cyprus were specifically designed to prepare for an Iranian response. That's the other side of this here, right? It's not like Israel is going to strike and Iran is just going to sit there and say, oh, gosh, we worked on this nuclear program for close to 30 years. And now, if it's not completely shattered and gone, man, it's set back decades or several years. And someone says, a member just wrote in saying, thank you. I'll get to the members in a second, guys. We really appreciate you. First, Waffen, I appreciate you as well. I'll get to the members in a second, give you guys a shout out. But just want to finish this thought real quick. It's not like Iran's going to sit on its hands and not respond. In Iraq in 81, Saddam didn't necessarily have the means to respond in any meaningful way. And remember, folks, he was bogged down at the time in a war against, you guessed it, Iran. The Iran-Iraq War, a bloody affair from 1980 to 1988. 1 million people killed, largely forgotten these days, right? It wasn't too long ago, just 34 years ago, that war ended. Now we have a situation where Iraq is largely under the sway of Iran and the Iranian regime, which is a sad state of affairs. But Saddam was bogged down in that war. 2007, Assad was not bogged down in a war, but two things. First, he didn't want to go toe-to-toe with Israel in any meaningful way. He knew if he reacted, Israel would have an even stronger reaction. Isaiah 17, which we've talked about many times here in the newscast, has not unfolded yet, but Assad may have sped up the timetable a bit. Only God can speed the timetable up. I'm joking, of course. But if he would have made one false move in 2007, it would not have ended well for him. That's first. Secondly, he was caught with his hand in the cookie jar, so to speak. He was developing an illicit nuclear weapons program with the help of North Korea, and he may have faced some international condemnation, perhaps some sanctions or boycotts at the time. So he had a vested interest in keeping things mum. Also, the third reason, it was an embarrassment for Assad and the Syrian regime. No other way to put it. So he had a vested interest in not responding in any meaningful way and keeping his mouth shut about what just befell his regime. Same with Saddam. Today is a different situation. Iran is a different beast, and I don't use that word lightly. The Iranian regime, I should say. They have not only their own robust ballistic missile stockpile that can reach Israel, but secondly, and even more importantly, the Ring of Fire, which surrounds Israel right now. Iran's proxies surrounding Israel, and with the goal of squeezing it like a vise, the state of Israel, which again is the size of the state of New Jersey. That gives you, again, the idea of the geographical boundaries of Israel and how small it really is. But again, you could probably do the roll call in your sleep by now. You've heard me talk about it so much here in the newscast at this point. But the Houthis in Yemen to the south, Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Hamas in Gaza to the southwest, Hezbollah, of course, to the north, and those Shia militias in Syria and Iraq to the east, the entire gamut of Iran's proxies surrounding Israel on all sides, quite literally. And Iran will activate that Ring of Fire. What does that mean? Well, this Ring of Fire is armed with, I would say at this point, you could say hundreds of thousands of rockets and missiles. I say that because Hezbollah alone has some 150,000 rockets and missiles pointed at every inch of Israel. Factor in Hamas and Islamic Jihad, that probably comes to around 25,000 in addition. Then you have the Shia militias, you have the Houthis, you have Iran. You're looking at over 200,000 rockets and missiles, again, pointed at every inch of Israel. Oh, and by the way, some of those missiles are increasingly precision guided, or at least that's the goal of the Iranian regime, to supply Hezbollah in particular with precision guided missiles. You may say, what does that mean? Well, they do exactly what their name says. They're designed to hit the target with great accuracy and great precision. That's why Israel has carried out hundreds upon hundreds of airstrikes in Syria over the past several years, specifically targeting Iranian weapons shipments, transiting those precision-guided or PGM, precision-guided missile or munition parts through Syria into the hands of Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, where the missiles can later be assembled by Hez. Israel is heading them off at the pass and striking those weapons depots before they can get any further. That's the main reason you've seen so much Israeli Air Force and surface-to-surface missile activity in Syria over the past, in particular, the past 5 years. Red line for Israel, they're not going to let it happen, but rest assured, if and when Israel strikes Iran's nuclear facilities, that ring of fire will be activated. We've said many times that it's a bit, to some, surprising. I don't believe it's surprising, but we've said many times, wow, is Hezbollah going to throw its hat in the ring this time? Every time Israel has some new engagement against Hamas and Gaza, some new war, most recently May 2021, and every time Israel carries out some daring, say, assassination of an Iranian leader. You think Soleimani was the U.S. with some Israeli intelligence help for sure. Fakhrizadeh, the father of Iran's nuclear weapons program, in November 2020. Last Sunday, this Iranian Revolutionary Guards officer Hassan Sayed Kodai, who was assassinated in front of his home in Tehran. Every time that happens, you kind of hold your breath and say, is this the moment where Iran is finally going to activate Hezbollah? Hey, folks, look, Iran has largely held Hezbollah in check and in reserve, in my view, since 2006. That was the last time Iran and Hezbollah went toe-to-toe. The anniversary is coming up this July. That will be 17 years. Wow, hard to believe. That was 17 years ago. I remember as a young or younger correspondent for CBN News covering that Israel-Hezbollah war in the summer of 2006. A lot has happened in 17 years. I believe at the time, Hezbollah had some 14,000 rockets and missiles. Now they've got 150,000 in 17 years. Someone tell me how that happens. Under the nose of the UN and UNIFIL and the UN peacekeeping force that is stationed in southern Lebanon. Bang up job, guys. You've done a heck of a job, or not. So Hezbollah stronger than ever, obviously, and battle-hardened and battle-tested, obviously, the Hezbollah shock troops and foot soldiers who have gained invaluable battlefield experience over the past decade fighting alongside Iran and Assad and Russia in Syria. So you have a formidable foe there, and as you know, if you've watched the Watchman Newscast or the TV show over the past few years, you know about Hezbollah's terror tunnel network. They dug from southern Lebanon into northern Israel. I was in one of those tunnels in June 2021 with the Israel Defense Forces. We have had that on previous newscasts and on the Watchman TV show as well. So a multifaceted enemy. I used that word earlier about Israel's approach in striking Iran's nuclear facilities. Well, Israel's enemies also have a multifaceted approach. The Ring of Fire and Hezbollah in and of itself has various ways that it can strike at Israel. But to say that Israel is highly prepared and highly capable of crushing Hezbollah decisively once and for all is an understatement. I talked about this military drill, Chariots of Fire, obviously, over the past few weeks, and Israel training in particular as part of this exercise on the island of Cyprus and in northern Israel for that inevitable Iranian Ring of Fire response and that Hezbollah response. Folks, I can tell you, Chariots of Fire is one thing. It's huge, the largest military drill, again, in Israel's modern history, really, going back decades. But this is nothing new. Again, if you've watched The Watchmen over the past few years, as far back as 2018, I have joined the Israel Defense Forces, I don't want to say I've been embedded with them, but I've been able to join a live fire drill, not literally join and pick up a weapon, but join it as a member of the media and cover it with the Watchman crew. Live fire tank drills, both early in the morning and late at night on the Golan, near the Syria border, near the Lebanon border. Hey, Israel's been drilling for this day for a long time, for years now. Nothing that comes out of the north is going to surprise them. I will tell you that. Israel, again, highly focused, highly prepared, ready, well-trained. And there were many mistakes made. If you talk to Israeli military figures and officials, current and former, as I have, think of our good friend Elliot Chodov, for instance, Israel Defense Forces Reserve Major. Some things that were done in 2006, the IDF, in hindsight, would have done differently today. I'll just leave it there. So lessons learned from that war as well, the last war in the north. And by the way, Hezbollah, for all the criticism that Israel's, the IDF, from within mostly, received for the 2006 war, still, Hezbollah was left licking its wounds. And there's a reason, not only the Iranian orders, but there's a reason Hezbollah hasn't really budged in a serious way in 17 years, because they were hit hard in 2006. And not only that, Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, he's been underground, probably never sleeping in the same place 2 nights in a row for 17 years. And that's largely because of the message Israel sent in the summer of 2006. And Nasrallah also said, remember, folks, what precipitated that 2006, Hezbollah along the Israel-Lebanon border, in places where I've spent a lot of time, kidnapped 2 Israeli soldiers and dragged them back into Lebanon, into the bowels of Hezbollah country. Nasrallah said, he said after the close of that war in 2006, if we had known that Israel would respond with such force and hit us so hard, we may not have done what we did. So 17 years, Israel has bought 17 years at least of relative quiet on the Lebanon border. Of course, flare-ups and a big incident in late 2018 when Israel uncovered those Hezbollah terror tunnels. But you have a situation where Hezbollah is essentially just waiting for the word from Iran. What will be the moment? Hey, folks, they're stockpiling this massive rocket missile arsenal, not by accident and not for their health. They are stockpiling it to eventually be used. And the big question is, when does Iran give the green light? And it may very well come if and when Israel strikes those nuclear weapons facilities. Or perhaps Iran holds back there. I'd find it hard to believe that Iran would not respond in some way and that Hezbollah would not be activated in some capacity if Israel carries out this daring strike against Iran's nuclear weapons facilities, which may be getting closer. More on that in a minute. And what the UN, yes, the UN even is saying about Iran's nuclear program. Let me catch my breath. I don't think I have for 30 minutes so far. By the way, in a little bit, we're going till 5 p.m. Eastern. Remember, questions, Q&A. And I've got the system down now, and I know where to find them. After every newscast live stream for a few weeks there, I would say to Daniel, our trusty producer, man, I got to be a little quicker in finding the questions. I'm fiddling around. Hold on, folks. I'm sorry, looking at my phone. Now I know where to find them. It was my fault. I'm not the most technically savvy guy. I'm better in front of the camera than behind the camera and behind the kind of editing board. I don't do that, unfortunately. I have a lot of respect for people who do. They're so creative and talented. But let me catch my breath and give everyone a shout out. Let's see. Wow, people around the world. There is some very interesting debate going on in the chat right now. When I look off to the side of my laptop here, I'm just kind of looking at the chat here. Okay, a lively debate and some lively chatting going on right now. We have thousands of people with us right now as well. And I want to give a shout out to some of our premium members. Thank you. Thank you all so much for being a premium member. You might be asking if you're watching, what's a premium member? Does that mean I can't watch anymore? No, all are welcome. Doesn't affect you Wherever you are around the world, if you're watching right now, it does not affect you if you're not a premium member, but it is a cool feature that we do here on the channel for $4.99 a month, about $5 a month. You get, number one, you help us stay on the air. And it's unfortunately, this channel is not free, the Watchman YouTube channel. And as you know, it's growing. We're at nearly 500,000 subscribers right now. Wow, hard to believe, only God, right? And with your help, our watchmen and women on the wall who join us, hey, if you haven't subscribed, it's free. Just click the subscribe button and click the notification bell as well, and you'll get alerts every time a new video is posted. But if you do want to become a premium member, hey, $4.99 a month, you get a few perks. And we just had a conversation about this today with the Watchman team about what we got planned. Number one, which is a pretty cool feature, I think, the Watchman TV show is on every week, obviously, on TBN. The newscast is one thing every day here on our YouTube channel. But the Watchman TV show, 30 minutes on the ground in Israel and points beyond around the world, across the Middle East, every week on TBN. 10 p.m. Eastern time on Thursday nights, 6:30 p.m. Eastern time on Friday nights. But here's the good news. If you're a premium member, you get to see the show, every new episode, before anyone else in the world sees it. It's kind of cool, right? You get the exclusive first look at every new episode of The Watchmen. Not only that, some exclusive behind-the-scenes commentary and encouragement from yours truly, which is kind of cool. I kind of intro every episode with some commentary. We go for several minutes. So it's a little bonus for you. And we are planning some other really fun features, including some premium member Q&A, exclusive Q&A for our premium member. You know, I always feel like we rush our Q&A a little bit at the end of the live stream, but we are working on, for premium members, doing exclusive Q&A where you'll have me all to yourself for a while, and we'll have plenty of time for questions. That's another thing. And also, last thing, and I'll stop bloviating, and then we will move on. But just wanted to say one more thing. 500,000, that magic number, 500,000 subscribers is coming up. We're, I think, at 458 now, which is unbelievable. Folks, to give you an idea about how far God has taken this channel in the past year and a half, in February 2021, what, about 16 months ago, we were at 158K. Now we're at 458. So we have grown by 300,000 subscribers in the past 16 months alone. That's pretty cool, and that's pretty incredible. And again, it's all because of God Almighty, first and foremost. Secondly, because of you. You're tuning in and you're joining us. We appreciate it. But for 500,000, we're thinking of something cool to do, special. So a lot of good things lined up. But if you're interested in premium membership, you can go to join on our homepage here on the channel and click join. And there you have it. You will be a premium member. And if you're not a premium member, I still love you. Don't worry about it. It's all good. You can still watch the newscast every day. But if you're a loyal viewer, we really think the premium membership that you'd enjoy it, and you get a lot out of it, and some pretty cool perks there for sure. Okay, there you go. Why is the UN? I'll pull my phone up for this. I'm going to quote directly. Why is the UN's nuclear watchdog, known as the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, just pulling up this article, I wanted to quote from it directly. Why are they sounding the alarm about Iran's nuclear weapons program? Let's take a look real quick. I want to quote directly some very interesting comments from the UN. Maybe they are good for something. We're not. Let's see. The UN said, gosh, I had this article, guys. I can't find it now. But, here it is. The IAEA board this is a statement from the UN, calls upon Iran to act on an urgent basis to fulfill its legal obligations and take up immediately the IAEA's offer of further engagement to clarify and resolve all outstanding safeguards issues. In English, here's what that means. The IAEA That's diplomat speak. The IAEA also announced that Iran is enriching uranium. And I'm not going to get too in the weeds about all the technical specifications of building a nuclear bomb. Just know that Iran's very close. Iran is enriching uranium at 18 times the level that is permitted under the 2015 Iran nuclear deal. Now, right now, and we've documented this on the newscast many times, the US and European powers and Russia and China, they've all been working feverishly in Vienna to forge a new Iran nuclear deal. Now, of course, it is stalled right now, those negotiations, because the US is refusing, shockingly, the Biden administration, I'm pleasantly shocked, is refusing to remove Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps from the terror watch list. Now, hopefully they stick to their guns in DC. Hopefully they're not just bluffing at a later date to say, oh, you know what? We want the deal so bad, we will remove that terrorist designation from the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps. It would not surprise me, obviously, given the track record of this current administration. But right now, at least, I'm shocked, they are sticking to their guns. What I thought we would see, and we may still see, to be frank, is that the Biden administration would play a sort of double game, which is very much like them, and they would say, okay, we will take the IRGC off the terror blacklist, but we'll keep Iran's Quds Force on the list. Now, the Quds Force is a branch of the IRGC that is really involved in spearheading Iran's external terror operations around the world. Qasem Soleimani, the not so dearly departed terror kingpin, he headed up the Quds Force in former days before he met his demise. So I thought that the Biden administration, that might be the compromise they struck, and they still may. But for now, long story short, the talks are stalled because the U.S. won't budge on that terror, removing the terror designation for Iran. But the fact that the IAEA is sounding the alarm, not exactly known as hawkish when it comes to Iran, the fact that they are sounding the alarm and saying, hey, 18 times the amount permitted under that original deal, it tells you, number one, that any new deal is an absolute sham, that the U.S., Europe should have walked away from the negotiating table months ago. Not only that, they should have never been at the negotiating table in the first place, because the Iranian regime is not an honest broker. That's been proven, I don't know, for the last 43 years since the mullahs took power in Tehran. But 18 times the level. There was another, a think tank, a research institute. The name escapes me. I was just reading this morning and doing research for the live stream. They say that Iran has, and it's a credible think tank, they say that Iran has enough enriched uranium right now to build, in their words, 3 or 4, quote, crude nuclear devices. Now, what does crude mean? Well, it means they don't have the capability right now to mount a nuclear warhead on a ballistic missile. That's the ultimate, right? You want to be able to deliver a nuclear payload on the end of a ballistic missile. That's the ultimate goal of every rogue regime that's driving for the bomb or possesses the bomb. Think Iran's good friends in North Korea. Iran reportedly right now does not have that capability, but I can tell you folks, they're working diligently to acquire that capability, no doubt. And their ballistic missile program is strong, it is expanding, and that includes intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs. And you develop ICBMs for one reason, and one reason only, and that is to mount them with a nuclear warhead. That is the only rationale for their existence, to be mounted with a nuclear warhead. That's why you develop ICBMs, and their name does what it says, right? Intercontinental. They're designed to travel across continents, across oceans. Ladies and gentlemen, those ICBMs are not for Israel. They're not even for Saudi Arabia. They're not even for Europe. ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles, they're for the nation that Iran refers to as the Great Satan. That would be, where I am sitting right now, the United States. So if anyone here in the West or in the US thinks Iran is only Israel's problem. We don't have to worry. We're separated by oceans. It's thousands and thousands of miles away. Think again, because the great Satan, in their words, has a bullseye on its back. In the Iranian eschatology, the Iranian regime ideology, Israel is the little Satan, in their words. It's America that is the great Satan and the ultimate prize. 3 to 4 crude nuclear devices, reportedly. What could be done? Okay, you can't mount them on a nuclear warhead, but aren't there other things you could do with a nuclear device, even if it's not mounted on a ballistic missile? I believe so. So that should give us all pause, and food for thought would be an understatement. Maybe concern, grave concern, and that's what, hey, and let me just add, God Almighty still sits on the throne. So I'm not sitting here biting my nails down to the nub. I have the peace that surpasses all understanding, because I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that God is in control. And I put my trust in him, in his son, the Lord Jesus. It's all good. And yet, it's like you're watching a car crash in slow motion here. And we know where this is going to end. And we know that a lot of people are going to be hurt because of Iran's nuclear weapons program. They're never going to be able to use the bomb. Israel will not allow them to get it. Bank on it. But many people perhaps in Iran who are not fans of this regime, the number one victims of the Iranian regime are the Iranian people, will be affected. But the day is coming, the day of reckoning for Iran's nuclear weapons program. And, I don't have I'm not foolish enough to say it's going to happen at the end of this year or 2023. Hey, this Iran nuclear crisis has been going on now for about, 20 years, at least. So more than 20, close to 25 now. This has been, some people have described it as the Cuban Missile Crisis in slow motion. So, hey, it could go on another 25, but I don't think so. I think time is short, not only when it comes to Iran's nuclear program and dealing with it, but for a lot of events in this upside down world, a world today, which is really what the prophet Isaiah described, where good is considered evil and evil is considered good. Put it this way. If you do not have a relationship with the Lord right now, if you've been putting it off and saying, I'll get back to church eventually, or I haven't prayed in like 10 years, but I'm not ready. Eventually I'll pray. Or the classic one is, I'm not good enough. God doesn't want to hear from me. I'm a sinner and I'm such a horrible person. I have to, before I can come to God, I have to get my act together, and then I can come to the Lord, and then I can come back into communion with him. Folks, that's not how it works. God wants you now, no matter how dirty or unclean you think you are, how flawed, how deep in sin you are mired right now. Don't put it off another day. And this is the time now. Trust me. When I say time is short, if you're a prophecy watcher, if you are a student of Bible prophecy, if it's one of your passions and you see these things, then you have discernment, you have clarity, you have the Holy Spirit, and you see these things developing in front of your eyes, you know that there's no time to waste. So no matter where you think, what station you are in life, God says, come as you are now. Now. Jesus didn't come. Jesus himself said, I didn't come, the healthy don't need a doctor. The sick do. He came for all of us. But hey, he's someone who dined with sinners, and he is ready. Believe me, there's nothing you've done that Jesus can't handle. He's ready for you right now, where you are right now. Hey, let's get into the Q&A. One thing before I do. Have you seen this? Maybe we can talk about the Q&A. Have we seen this, or have you seen this Israeli laser system, the laser dome, I guess you would call it, where it only cost, hard to believe, $2 per interception. We, of course, have Iron Dome, Israel's groundbreaking missile defense system, but they're working with lasers to shoot down incoming rockets. And it only cost the news is today, $2 per rocket intercepted. Whereas I can tell you, Iron Dome costs millions upon millions. It's very expensive, those Iron Dome batteries, as are David Sling and the Arrow missile defense system that Israel employs as well. Israel's got Iron Dome for short range. It's got David Sling for mid-range rockets and the Arrow system to counter longer range rockets. And all three will be in use, I believe, if Iran activates that ring of fire. Let's get into the questions. But the laser, it's fascinating to me, and again, shows you that Israeli ingenuity, the brilliance of the Jewish people, and that, again, Israel, I don't mean to say has something up its sleeve, but Israel has a lot of surprises, let's just say, in the Israel Defense Forces that the world has not seen yet, and that Iran certainly has not seen. Let's just say that. Okay, what do we have right now? We've got the questions, and this is so nice. They're right in front of me. Aaron James asks, did Putin ban pork in Russia? I haven't heard that, Aaron. I don't think so. Vladimir Putin has, to my knowledge, has not banned pork in Russia. Are you alluding perhaps to the Muslim population in Russia, the Chechens perhaps? Would he do? No, he has not banned pork in Russia. He's actually had Chechen Muslims fighting alongside Russian forces in Ukraine, and Muslim mercenaries from Syria and Libya also fighting alongside him in Ukraine. And not only that, he is aligned openly with Islamic jihadists in Syria in the form of the Iranian regime and Hezbollah. So no, Vladimir Putin is not looking to offend Muslims right now and ban pork. He's aligned right now with radical Islamists, sadly. Let's see. A basic question here from Carly, but a good question. Do you think it will be very soon for Israel to strike? Carly, I just said a minute ago, I'm not going to make any predictions, but I would say sooner rather than later for Israel to strike. I would say that because Israel doesn't want to strike at all. Israel ideally would never have to do it, but I believe the Iranian regime is forcing Israel's hand. And I said a minute ago, 3 to 4 crude nuclear devices, and breakout time could be a week. Other U.S. officials saying Iran could break out and build a bomb within a week. I mean, they're pushing Israel's hand. Not only that, the Iranian nuclear deal is going nowhere. And even if there is a new deal signed, and there may very well be a new deal signed eventually, even if there is, it's going to be flimsy and terrible and even worse than the 2015 deal. They're forcing Israel's hand. I can't make a prediction here and say August 2022, but I would just say I would think it would be sooner rather than later that Israel would strike Iran's nuclear facilities, because Iran is progressing pretty rapidly, right? And the longer Israel waits, the harder the job gets. The more these underground facilities become fortified, the more Iran prepares. So you got to think, even though the Israeli government right now is kind of topsy-turvy, and will this coalition even last? It's been almost a year now since this Naftali Bennett-led coalition came into power late June 2021. They've lasted practically a year, but how long will they last? That could also impact the timetable. Let's see what we have. Donald Domus. Donald, good to have you with us. Asks about the book of Jeremiah, chapter 49, verses 34 and 39. Is that describing a future coordinated effort between Israel and some Sunni Arab nations against Iran? Donald, quite possibly. Many believe they call that the prophecy of Elam, or Elam, E-L-A-M. And many believe that refers to an Israeli strike and the after effects of that strike against Iran's nuclear facilities. Folks, check that out. Jeremiah 49, verses 34 to 39. I think you'll find it fascinating. I'm sad to say that's a verse I've neglected a lot here on the newscast. We've been focused a lot on Ezekiel 38 and 39, Isaiah 17 in particular. And also, by the way, a teaser there. And Donald, great question. Great point. That could very well, I believe, Jeremiah 49 foreshadow an Israeli strike on the western half. Think of that Bushehr nuclear reactor where it's located near the Gulf. Elam was, in biblical times, considered a part of Western Persia, I guess you would say, near the Gulf. So yeah, Donald, great point. I encourage everyone to check that out. Jeremiah 49, verses 34 to 39. Psalm 83. I've gotten a lot of questions on Psalm 83. I've got some good news for y'all. Do you know Bill Salas? Does that word or does that name ring a bell? Bill Salas, an old friend of mine, wrote a book, a few books actually. He's a prolific author, but a book about Psalm 83 in particular. Is that prophetic? Is that a prophecy for our times, or has it already been fulfilled? Well, I saw Bill speak in my neck of the woods last week, and we had lunch as well the next day. Bill will be on the Watchman Newscast soon, and we will dig into Psalm 83. I think you're going to like it. Some good stuff. Okay, what else do we have? This is great. We have a bunch of questions here. I like this question from Jim Stewart. Erick, your thoughts. And Jim, this is something I have thought about many times. Jim asks, Erick, your thoughts. Knowing that Hezbollah would retaliate if Israel hits Iran. I think so, Jim. Do you think Israel would hit Hezbollah simultaneously or before it strikes Iran? What Jim is saying basically is, would Israel get ahead? And you know Hezbollah is going to react. Instead of waiting for it, why not, as you're striking the nuclear facilities, hit Hezbollah at the same time and preemptively hit them and surprise them before they can act? Remember, it makes me think of the 6-Day War when the Israeli Air Force destroyed the Egyptian Air Force preemptively when it was still on the ground on a morning in Egypt. It was in the morning time. Guys were kind of getting their coffee and their tea, and out of nowhere came Israeli fighter jets and literally destroyed. The war was over right there, the war with Egypt at least. So could we see a similar scenario where Israel strikes Hezbollah unannounced and unexpected? I believe yes, Jim. You would think. I am not a military planner. I love military history. I follow it very closely. I've interviewed many military planners, but from a layman point of view, you would think, gosh, that would make a lot of sense, right? For Israel, rather than, okay, if you know you're going to face an onslaught of Hezbollah rockets when you hit the nuclear facilities, it would seem to make sense. Although Israel clearly doesn't want to fight on two fronts, they're probably going to have to anyway. It would seem to make sense to preemptively weaken Hezbollah and weaken the Hezbollah response in the process. Great point, Jim. I have no idea what Israeli military planners are thinking in that regard, but that seems to be a pretty legit scenario, I would say. Okay, we've got a premium member too here I want to get to. Denver Johnson. Denver asks, this is a great question. Question for you, Erick. What kind of role will Azerbaijan play in this forthcoming war between Israel and Iran, considering Israel is close, not geographically, but they have a close relationship with Azerbaijan? Denver, great question. And, I was just talking to an Israeli friend about Azerbaijan. Now, you might be saying, Azerbaijan what? And you might say, where's my map? Where's this place? Okay, here's what you need to know. Azerbaijan was a former Soviet republic. It's a majority Shia Muslim nation. And the key point, geographically, it is just to the north of Iran. Azerbaijan borders Iran. Many people think that the ancient Medes from the Bible, the Medes and the Persians who conquered Babylon, and think of Daniel and the role he played in that kingdom, that perhaps Azerbaijan was home to some of the Medes in that ancient empire. So it's an interesting ancient culture there. Baku is the capital, right on the Caspian Sea. An amazing place from what I've heard. But you might say, okay, why does that matter? Well, number one, again, Azerbaijan is on the northern border of Iran, which is important in and of itself. But even more importantly, as Denver pointed out, Israel and Azerbaijan have a close relationship, increasingly close. And you got to think that Israel, I don't know if Israel would use Azerbaijan physically as a launching point somehow in a future conflict with Iran or a strike against Iran's nuclear facilities, but you have to think, in the very least, Israel is using Azerbaijan to gather intelligence on Iran, perhaps the transit operatives inside Iran. Hey, we've seen these daring operations that have taken out Iranian foot soldiers, Revolutionary Guards, officials, and officers we've seen sabotage against Iran's nuclear facilities and its ballistic missile depots. Perhaps there are some coming in from Azerbaijan. We don't know. I don't want to make that charge or say anything like that, but I don't think it's a coincidence that Azerbaijan and Israel have a very close, not very close, but a close relationship and a very warm relationship at this point in history, considering Azerbaijan's location and what's going on with Iran right now. Denver, great point, folks. Keep an eye on Azerbaijan. Now, they had a war with Armenia. I guess that was fall 2020, a flare-up once again. Israel caught a lot of flack for helping Azerbaijan. Turkey is also aligned with Azerbaijan, but Israel caught some flack. Armenia historically is a Christian nation, but Armenia has crazy geopolitical situation, and Armenia has good relationships, surprisingly, with Iran. So a lot going on there, a lot of dynamics, but Israel has a vested interest in keeping a good relationship with Azerbaijan, first and foremost because of Iran. And look, it's a Muslim nation, and Israel wants to have friends among Muslim nations to help against Iran. So we've seen out the Abraham Accords as well. Lipaz Dotan, Manishma Lipaz, good to see you again. And she has a question. She's also a great premium member of ours. Lipaz, good to hear from you. She asks, Eric, did you hear about the new flag bill that is now being talked about? What's your opinion? Lipaz, I have not heard about it. This is an Israeli flag bill, I'm guessing. Now, we're on the heels of the flag march on Jerusalem Day on Sunday. It was May 29th. And look, there was some unrest, some clashes with Palestinians throwing rocks and insults and physically attacking Israelis. But there was no massive blow up, literally, like we saw last year. So the Jerusalem Day March mostly went off without a hitch. There were some elements on the Israeli side as well that were getting very rowdy, reportedly. But there were some clashes, but largely it went off, without a hitch, as it is in other years. But the flag march was a big point of contention, where Israelis march, waving the Star of David through the streets of Jerusalem, through the old city. So Lipaz, I apologize. I didn't hear about the flag bill. I know the flag march was controversial. It should not have been. Israel has been doing that for 30 years now. It's a patriotic event that I've seen up close. I've filmed, and it's a great day. Jerusalem Day is a great day. The flag march is a great event. So, but if you have any more details on that, feel free to send them along, Lipaz. We're wrapping up here in a minute, but let's see. Sorry, I couldn't answer that one better. Let's see. Chris Mooney, any trips to Israel soon, he asks. Would love to see a trip where we can meet you and your YouTube production team. Chris, do you live in Israel? If you do, perhaps I will see you there. I'm thinking the fall. I was just in Israel in February. I was in Israel also for a few days in late April, in addition to the UAE and Bahrain. But I had a good 8 days in Israel in February, then about 4 days in April. I am sure I will be back soon. Today's June 1st. Usually July, August, I don't go. Sometimes late August, but July, August, I don't go, first and foremost because it's sweltering. I love Israel any month of the year. And I like the hot weather too. But I'm filming outside, and hey, you're trying to film in the Galilee at like 4 p.m. or 3 p.m. in July or early August. It ain't too pleasant. I'll just say that, the conditions. So September seems likely that I would get back, I would think, but I'll keep you guys posted on that for sure, no doubt. We got to wrap up. Unfortunately, it's been an hour. This was great. Great stuff, everyone. Great questions from everyone. Man, good stuff. So tomorrow we will be back. That is a threat and a promise. Not a threat. It's a promise. I'll be back with you tomorrow, guys. It was great, great, great today. Again, if you haven't subscribed, be sure to subscribe and join us so you can be with us every day. And premium membership, again, a cool feature. Just go to join on the homepage. There you have it. God bless you all. Until tomorrow, thanks again. And remember, never hold your peace. Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. If you enjoyed this episode and want to see more, make sure you go ahead and hit the like button, click subscribe, and tap the bell icon to turn on notifications for new Watchman Newscast episodes every weekday.